Biodiversity and conservation. If an alien from a distant galaxy were to visit our planet Earth, the first thing that would amaze and blurt in would most probably be the enormous diversity of life that he would encounter. Even for humans, the rich variety of living organisms with which they share this planet never ceases to astonish and fascinating us. The common man would find it hard to believe that there are more than 20,000 species of ants, 3 lakh species of beetles, and 28,000 species of fishes, and nearly 20,000 species of orchids. Ecologists and evolutionary biologists have been trying to understand the significance of such diversity by asking important questions. Why are there so many species? Does such great diversity exist throughout Earth's history? How did this diversification come about? How and why is this diversity important to the biosphere? Would it function any differently if the diversity was much less? How do humans benefit from the diversity of life? Biodiversity. In our biosphere, immense diversity or heterogeneity exists not only at the species level but at all levels of biological organization, ranging from micromolecule within cell biomass. Biodiversity is the term popularized by the sociobiologist Edward Wilson to describe the combined diversity at all the levels of biological organization. The most important of them are: 1. Genetic diversity. A single species might show how diversity at the genetic level over its distributional range. The genetic variation shown by the medicinal plant Rauwolfia vomitoria growing in different Himalayan range might be in terms of potency and concentration of the active chemical reserpine that the plant produces. India has more than 50,000 genetically defined strains of rice and 1,000 varieties of mango. 2. Species diversity. The diversity at the species level, for example, the Western Ghats have greater amphibian species diversity than the Eastern Ghats. 3. Ecological diversity. At the ecosystem level, India, for instance, with its desert, rainforest, mangroves, coral reef, wetland, estuaries, and alpine meadows, has a great ecosystem diversity than a Scandinavian country like Norway. It has taken millions of years of evolution to accumulate this rich diversity in nature, but we could lose all that wealth in less than 2 centuries if the present rates of species losses continue. Biodiversity and its conservation are now vital environmental issue of international concern as more and more people around the world begin to realize the critical importance of biodiversity for our survival and well-being of this planet. How many species are there on Earth and how many in India? Since there are published records of all the species discovered and named, we know how many species in all have been recorded so far, but it is not easy to answer the questions of how many species there are on Earth. According to the International Union for Conservation of Nature and Natural Resources, 2004, the total number of plant and animal species described so far is slightly more than 1.5 million, but we have no clear idea of how many species are yet to be discovered and described. Estimates vary widely and many of them are only educated guesses. For many taxonomic groups, species inventories are more complete in temperate than in tropical countries. considering that an overwhelmingly large proportion of the species waiting to be discovered are in the tropics. Biologists make a statistical comparison to the temperate tropical species richness of an exhaustively studied group of insects and extrapolate this ratio to other group of animal and plant to come up with the gross estimate of total number of species on Earth. Some extreme estimates range from 20 to 50 million, but a more conservative and scientifically sound estimate made by Robert May placed the global species diversity at about 7 million. Let us look at some interesting aspects about Earth diversity based on the currently available species inventories. More than 70% of all the species recorded are animal, while plant including algae, fungi, biophytes, gymnosperm and angiosperm comprise no more than 22% of the total. Among animal, insects are the most species-rich taxonomic group, making up more than 70% of total. That means out of every 10 animals on this planet, 7 are insects. Again, how do we explain this enormous diversification of insects? The number of fungi species in the world is more than the combined total of the species of fishes, amphibians, reptiles and mammals. In figure, biodiversity is depicted showing species number of major taxa. It should be noted that these estimates do not give any figure for prokaryotes. Biologists are not sure about how many prokaryotic species there might be. The problem is that conventional taxonomic methods are not suitable for identifying microbial species and many species are simply not culturable under the laboratory conditions. If we accept biochemical or molecular criteria for delineating species for this group, then their diversity alone might run into millions. Although India has only 2.4% of the world's land area, its share of global species diversity is an impressive 8.1%. That is what makes our country one of the 12 mega diversity countries of the world. Nearly 45,000 species of plant and twice as many of animal have been recorded from India. How many living species are actually there waiting to be discovered and named? If we accept May's global estimate, only 22% of the total species have been recorded so far. Applying this proportion of India's diversity figure, we estimate that there are probably more than 1 lakh plant species and more than 3 lakhs animal species yet to be discovered and described. Would we ever be able to complete the inventory of the biological wealth of our country? Consider the immense trained manpower, taxonomists, and the time required to complete the job. The situation appears more hopeless when we realize that a large fraction of these species faces the threat of being extinct even before we discover them. Nature's biological library is burning even before we catalog the title of all the books stocked there. Pattern of biodiversity. 1. Latitudinal gradient. The diversity of plant and animal is not uniform throughout the world but show a rather uneven distribution. For example, group of animals or plants, there are interesting patterns in diversity, the most well known being the latitudinal gradient in diversity. In general, species diversity decreases as you move away from equator towards the pole, with very few exceptions. Tropic latitudinal range 23 23.5 degree north to 23.5 degree south harbor more species than temperate or polar areas. Colombia, located near the equator, has nearly 1,400 species of birds, while New York at 41 degree north has 105 species, and Greenland at 71 degree north only 56 species. India, with much of its land area in the tropical latitudes, has more than 1,200 species birds. A forest in a tropical region like Ecuador has up to 10 times as many species of vascular plant as a forest of equal area in temperate regions like the Midwest of the USA. The largely tropical Amazonian rainforest in South America has the greatest biodiversity on Earth. It is home to more than 40,000 species of plants, 300 of fishes, 1,300 of birds, 427 mammals, 427 amphibians, 378 of reptiles, and more than 125,000 invertebrates. Scientists estimate that in this rainforest there might be at least 2 million insect species waiting to be discovered and named. What is so special about tropical that might account for their greater biological diversity? Ecologists and evolutionary biologists have proposed various hypotheses. Some important ones are speciation is generally a function of time, unlike temperate regions subject of frequent glaciation in the past. Tropical latitudes have remained relatively undistributed for millions of years and thus had a long evolutionary time for species diversification. The tropical environment, unlike temperate one, are less seasonal, relatively more constant and predictable. Such constant environment promotes niche specialization and lead to a better biodiversity. And see, there is more solar energy available in the tropic, which contribute to higher productivity. This is in turn might contribute indirectly to greater diversity. To species area relationship. During his pioneering and extensive exploration in the wilderness of South America jungle, the great German naturalist and geographer Alexander von Humboldt observed that within a region species richness increases with increasing explored area, but only up to a limited. In fact, the relationship between species richness and area for a wide variety of taxa ranges from plant, bird, pets, freshwater fishes turn out to be a rectangular hyperbola. On a logarithmic scale, the relationship is a straight line described by the equation log s equal to log c plus z log a, where Js equals species richness, A area, Z slope of the line, regression coefficient, C equal Y intercept, Y minus intercept. Ecologists have discovered that the value of Z lies in the range of 0.1 to 0.2 regardless of the taxonomic group or the region where whether it is the plant in Britain, bird in California or mollusk in New York State. The slope of the regression line are amazingly similar, but if you analyze the species area relationship among very large area like the entire continents, you will find out that the slope of the line to be much steeper, Z value in the range of 0.6 to 1.2. For example, the frugivorous fruit-eating birds and mammals in the tropical forest of different continents, the slope is found to be 1.15 What do steeper slope mean in this context? Does the importance of species diversity to the ecosystem? Does the number of species in a community really matter to the functional of the ecosystem? This is a question for which ecologists have not been able to give a definite answer. For example, for many decades, ecologists believed that communities with more species generally tend to be more stable than those with less species. What exactly is stability for a biological community? A stable community should not show too much variation in productivity from year to year. It must be either resistant or resilient to occasional disturbances, natural or man-made, and it must also be resistant to invasion by alien species. We don't know how these attributes are linked to species richness in a community, but David Tillman's long-term ecosystem experiments using outdoor plots provide some tentative answer. Tillman found that plots with more species would show less year-to-year variation in total biomass. He also showed that in his experiment, increased diversity contributes to higher productivity. Although we may not understand completely how species richness contributes to the well-being of an ecosystem, we know enough to realize that rich biodiversity is not only essential for ecosystem health but imperative for the very survival of the human race on this planet. At a time when we are losing species at an alarming pace, one might ask, does it really matter to us if a few species become extinct? Would Western Ghat ecosystem be less functional if one of its tree frog species is lost forever? How is our quality of life affected if, say, instead of 20,000 we have only 15,000 species of ant on Earth? There are no direct answers to such native questions, but we can develop a proper perspective through an analogy. The proper hypothesis used by Stanford ecologist Paul Ehrlich. In an airplane ecosystem, all parts are joined together using thousands of rivet pieces. If every passenger traveling in it start dropping a rivet to take home, causing a species to be extinct, it may not affect highly safety proper functioning of the ecosystem initially, but as more and more rivets are removed, the plane becomes dangerously weak over a period of time. Furthermore, which rivet is removed may be also critical. Loss of rivet on the wings, key species that drive major ecosystem function, is obviously a more serious threat to flight safety than loss of few rivet on the seat or window inside the plane. Loss of biodiversity. While it is doubtful if any new species are being added through speciation into the Earth's treasury of species, there is no doubt about their continuing losses. The biological wealth of our planet has been declining rapidly, and the accusing finger is clearly pointing to human activities. The colonization of tropical specific islands by humans is said to have led to the extinction of more than 200,000 species of native bird. The IUCN Red List 2004 documents the extinction of 784 species, including 338 vertebrates, 359 invertebrates, and 87 plants in the last 500 years. Some examples of recent extinction include the dodo, Mauritius, quagga, Africa, thylacine, Australia, stellar sea cow, Russia, and 3 subspecies Bali, Javan, Caspian of tiger. The last 20 years alone have witnessed the disappearance of 27 species. Careful analysis of the record show that extinction across taxa are not random. Some groups like amphibian appear to be more vulnerable to extinction, adding to the grim scenario of extinction in the fact that more than 15,500 species worldwide are facing the threat of extinction. Presently, 12% of all bird species, 23% of all mammal species, 32% of all amphibian species, and 31% of all gymnosperm species in the world face the threat of extinction. From a study of the history of life on Earth through fossil record, we learn that large-scale losses of species like the one we are currently witnessing have also happened earlier, even before humans appeared on the scene. During the long period, more than 3 billion years since the origin and diversification of life on Earth, there were 5 episodes of mass extinction of species. How is the 6th extinction presently in progress different from the previous episode? The difference is in the rate. The current species extinction rates are estimated to be 100 to 1000 times faster than in the pre-human times, and our activities are responsible for the faster rate. Ecologists warn that if the present trend continues, nearly half of all the species on Earth might be wiped out within the next 100 years. In general, loss of biodiversity in a region may lead to a decline in plant production, be lowered resistance to environmental perturbation such as drought, and see increased variability in certain ecosystem processes such as plant productivity, water use, and pest and disease cycle. Cause of biodiversity losses. The accelerated rate of species extinction that the world is facing now largely due to human activities. There are 4 major causes. The evil quarter is the sobriquet used to describe them. 1. Habitat loss and fragmentation. This is the most important cause driving animal and plant to extinction. The most dramatic example of habitat loss come from tropical rainforest, once covering more than 14% of the Earth's land surface. These rainforests now cover no more than 6%. They are being destroyed fast. By the time you finish reading this chapter, 100,000 more hectares of rainforest would have been lost. The Amazon rainforest, it is so huge that it is called the lungs of planet. Harboring probably millions of species is being cut and cleared for cultivating soybeans or for conservation or to grassland for raising beef cattle. Besides total loss, the degradation of many habitats by pollution also threatens the survival of many species. When large habitats are broken up into small fragments due to various human activities, mammals and birds requiring large territories, the certain animals with migratory habits are badly affected, leading to population decline. 2. Overexploitation. Humans have always depend on nature for food and shelter, but when need turn to greed, it leads to overexploitation of natural resources. Many species extinction in the last 500 years, stellar sea cow, passenger pigeon, were due to overexploitation by humans. Presently, many marine fish populations around the world are over-harvested. endangering the continued existence of some commercially important species. 3. Alien species invasion. When alien species are introduced unintentionally or deliberately for whatever purpose, some of them turn invasive and cause decline or extinction of the indigenous species. The meal perch introduced into Lake Victoria in the East Africa led eventually to the extinction of an ecologically unique assemblage of more than 200 species of cichlid fish in the lake. You must be familiar with the environmental damage caused and threat posed to our native species by invasive weed species like carrot grass, Parthenium, lantana, and water hyacinth. The recent illegal introduction of the African catfish, Clarice gariospinus, for aquaculture purposes is posing a threat of the indigenous catfish in our rivers. For co-extinction, when a species becomes extinct, the plant and animal species associated with it in a obligatory way also become extinct. When a hotfish species becomes extinct, its unique assemblage of parasites also meet the same fate. Another example in the case of co-evolved plant pollination mutualism, where extinction of one invariably leads to extinction of the other. Biodiversity conservation. Why should we conserve biodiversity? There are many reasons, some obvious and others not so obvious, but all equally important. They can be grouped into 3 categories: narrowly utilitarian, broadly utilitarian, and ethical. The narrowly utilitarian argument for conserving biodiversity are obvious. Human derives countless direct economic benefits from nature: food, cereal, pulses, fruits, firewoods, fiber, construction material, industrial products, tannin, lubricant, dyes, resin, perfume, and product of medicinal importance. More than 25% of the drugs currently sold in the market worldwide are derived from the plant, and 25,000 species of the plant contribute to the traditional medicines used by native people around the world. Nobody knows how many more medicinally useful plants there are in the tropical rainforest waiting to be explored. With increasing resources put into bioprospecting, exploring molecular, genetic, and species level diversity for product of the economic importance. Nations endowed with rich biodiversity can expect to reap enormous benefit. The broadly utilitarian argument says that biodiversity plays a major role in many ecosystem services that nature provides. The first, dwindling Amazon forest is estimated to produce through photosynthesis 20% of the total oxygen in the Earth's atmosphere. Can we put an economic value of this service by nature? You can get some idea by finding out how much your neighborhood hospital spends on a cylinder of oxygen. Pollination, without which plant cannot give us food or seeds, is another service ecosystem provides through pollinator layers, bees, bumblebees, birds, and bats. What would be the cost of accomplishing pollination without the help of natural pollinator? There are other intangible benefits that we derive from the nature: the aesthetic pleasure of walking through thick wood, watching spring flowers in full bloom, or walking up to a bulbul song in the morning. Can we put a price tag on such things? The ethical argument for conserving biodiversity relates to what we owe to millions of plant, animal, and micro species with whom we share this planet. Philosophically and spiritually, we need to realize that every species has an intrinsic value, even if it may not be of current or any economic value to us. We have a moral duty to care for their well-being and pass on our biological legacy in good order to future generations. How do we conserve biodiversity? When we conserve and protect the whole ecosystem, its biodiversity at all levels is protected. We save the entire forest to save the tiger. This approach is called in situ on-site conservation. However, when there are situations where an animal or plant is endangered or threatened, organism facing a very high risk of extinction in the wild in the near future and need urgent measures to save it from extinction. Ex situ off-site conservation in the desirable approach. In situ conservation. Faced with the conflict between development and the conservation, many nations find it unrealistic and economically not feasible to conserve all their biological wealth. Invariably, the number of species waiting to be saved from extinction far exceed the conservation resources available. On a global basis, this problem has been addressed by eminent conservationists. They identify for maximum protection certain biodiversity hotspot regions with very high level of species richness and high degree of endemism. That is, species confined to that region are not found anywhere else. Initially 25 biodiversity hotspots were identified, but subsequently 9 more have been added to the list, bringing the total number of biodiversity hotspots to the world to 34. These hotspots are also regions of accelerated habitat loss. 3 of these hotspots, Western Ghat and Sri Lanka, Indo-Burma and Himalaya, cover our country's exceptionally high biodiversity region. Although all the biodiversity hotspots put together cover less than 2% of the Earth's land area, the number of species collectively harbored is extremely high, and strict protection of the hotspot could reduce the ongoing mass extinction by almost 30%. In India, ecologically unique and biodiversity rich regions are legally protected as Biosphere Reserve, National Park and Sanctuaries. India now has 14 Biosphere Reserve, 90 National Park and 448 wildlife sanctuaries. India has also a history of religious and cultural traditions that emphasize protection of nature. In many cultures, tracts of forest were set aside and all the trees and wildlife within were venerated and given total protection. Such sacred groves are found in Khasi and Jaintia hills in Meghalaya, Aravalli hills of Rajasthan, Western Ghat region of Karnataka and Maharashtra and Sarguja, Chandra and Bastar area of Madhya Pradesh. In Meghalaya, the sacred groves are the last refuge for a large number of rare and threatened plants. Ex situ reservation. In this approach, threatened animals and plants are taken out from their natural habitat and placed in special setting where they can be protected and given special care. Zoological park, botanical garden and wildlife safari park serve this purpose. There are many animals that have become extinct in the wild but continue to be maintained in zoological parks. In recent years, ex situ conservation has advanced beyond keeping threatened species in enclosure. Now, gametes of threatened species can be preserved in viable and fertile conditions for long periods using cryopreservation techniques. Eggs can be fertilized in vitro and plants can be propagated using tissue culture method. Seeds of different genetic strains of commercially important plants can be kept for long periods in seed bank. Biodiversity knows no political boundaries and its conservation is therefore a collective responsibility of all nations. The historic conservation of biological biodiversity, the Earth Summit held at Rio de Janeiro in 1992, called upon all nations to take appropriate measures for conservation of biodiversity and sustainable utilization of its benefit. In follow-up, the World Summit of Sustainable Development held in 2002 in Johannesburg, South Africa, 190 countries pledged their commitment to achieve by 2010 a significant reduction in the current rate of biodiversity loss at global, regional and